Night Watchmen. Part 1. The Arrival. Moving into the old estate was supposed to be a fresh start. After months of searching for the perfect home, I found the ancient mansion nestled on the outskirts of town, surrounded by overgrown gardens and dense woods. The real estate agent's warnings about the estate's history, rumors of hauntings and mysterious disappearances, had only fueled my curiosity. I was eager to unravel the secrets of this grand, decaying beauty. The first few days were uneventful. The air inside the estate was thick with the scent of old wood and dust. I spent my time exploring the many rooms, each one a time capsule filled with relics of a bygone era. I marveled at the intricate woodwork, the faded tapestries, and the grand staircase that spiraled upward like a twisted spine. But it was the garden that truly captivated me. Scattered throughout the grounds were stone statues of varying sizes, knights in armor, maidens in flowing gowns, and even a few grotesque gargoyles. They stood silently, their lifeless eyes staring blankly into the distance, their expressions frozen in time. There was something unsettling about them, but I brushed off the feeling, attributing it to my overactive imagination. It was on the fifth night that things began to change. I woke to a strange noise, soft, rhythmic thuds echoing through the hallways. My heart pounded in my chest as I sat up in bed, straining to hear. The sound was faint but unmistakable, growing louder with each passing second. I grabbed a flashlight from my bedside table and crept out of my room, my bare feet silent on the cold wooden floor. The air was colder than usual, and I could see my breath misting in the dim beam of the flashlight. I followed the sound down the hallway, my pulse quickening with every step. The noise led me to the grand staircase, its shadowy depths stretching out before me like a yawning chasm. I hesitated, fear gnawing at the edges of my resolve, but curiosity pushed me onward, down the steps, and into the darkness below. The basement was a maze of corridors and storage rooms, filled with old furniture and forgotten belongings. The air was damp and musty, and the walls were lined with cobwebs that glistened in the flashlight's beam. The sound was louder now, a steady rhythm that seemed to pulse through the very walls of the estate. I turned a corner and froze. Standing in the middle of the corridor was one of the stone statues from the garden, a knight in full armor, his sword raised as if in mid-battle. My heart raced as I approached, the beam of my flashlight trembling in my hand. The statue was identical to the ones outside, down to the smallest detail. But how had it gotten here? Before I could ponder the question further, the statue's head turned. The motion was slow and deliberate, the sound of grinding stone filling the air. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. The statue's eyes, once lifeless stone, now gleamed with an eerie light, their gaze fixed on me. Panic surged through me, and I turned to run, but the corridor was filled with more statues, their stone forms blocking my path. They moved with a surreal grace, their heavy limbs creaking and groaning with each step. I could feel their eyes on me, cold and unyielding. I sprinted back the way I had come, my flashlight swinging wildly as I navigated the twisting corridors. The statues pursued me, their footsteps echoing through the basement like a relentless drumbeat. I burst through the door at the top of the stairs and slammed it shut behind me, my chest heaving with exertion. For a moment there was silence. I leaned against the door, my mind racing to make sense of what I had seen. But the quiet was shattered by a low, rumbling voice that seemed to come from the very walls themselves. "Reveal the secret," it whispered, the words reverberating through the hallway, "or face the wrath of the night watchman." I backed away from the door, my hands trembling. The statues had come to life, and they were demanding something from me, something hidden within the walls of the estate. But what secret could be so important that it warranted such a terrifying pursuit? I spent the rest of the night barricaded in my room, my mind racing with fear and confusion. The first light of dawn brought no comfort, only the chilling realization that I was trapped in a nightmare. The statues were not mere decorations. They were guardians of a dark and ancient secret, and they would not rest until I had uncovered it. As the sun rose, casting long shadows across the estate, I knew that my ordeal was far from over. The night watchmen had awakened, and their relentless pursuit had only just begun. Part 2. Unveiling Shadows. The morning brought little comfort. Despite the warmth of the sun filtering through the grand windows, the estate felt colder than ever. Every creak of the old house, every distant rustle set my nerves on edge. The memory of the night's events clung to me, a chilling reminder of the nightmare that had come to life. Determined to understand what was happening, I decided to explore the estate further. There had to be something, an explanation, a clue, hidden within its ancient walls. I started with the library, a vast room filled with towering bookshelves that seemed to stretch to the ceiling. Dust motes floated in the shafts of sunlight, giving the room an ethereal quality. I began pulling books from the shelves, hoping to find something, anything, that could shed light on the estate's dark history. The volumes were old and varied, covering topics from local history to obscure mythology. Hours passed as I pored over the brittle pages, the quiet ticking of the grandfather clock the only sound in the room. It was nearly midday when I found it. Tucked away behind a row of forgotten tomes was a leather-bound journal. The cover was worn and faded, but the pages inside were remarkably well preserved. The handwriting was elegant, the ink slightly faded with age. The journal belonged to Edward Thornfield, the original owner of the estate. As I read his entries, a picture began to form, a tale of ambition, greed, and a terrible curse. Thornfield had been an avid collector of rare artifacts, and his most prized possession had been a set of ancient statues said to guard a great secret. The statues, according to Thornfield, were not mere stone carvings, but vessels for powerful spirits bound to protect the secret within the estate. They would come to life at night, ensuring that no one could uncover the hidden truth without paying a terrible price. Thornfield had grown obsessed with the secret, convinced it held the key to unimaginable power. His journal detailed his attempts to communicate with the spirits, to bargain with them, and ultimately, his descent into madness. The final entries were incoherent, filled with frantic scribbles and desperate pleas for forgiveness. I closed the journal, my hands shaking. The statues were guardians, cursed to protect the estate's secret for all eternity. And now that curse had ensnared me. As night fell, I prepared myself for another encounter. I armed myself with a flashlight and a heavy iron poker from the fireplace, hoping it might offer some protection. My plan was simple. I would confront the statues, demand answers, and try to find a way to lift the curse. The house was eerily silent as I made my way through the dimly lit halls. Shadows danced on the walls, and the air grew colder with each step. I could feel the statues watching me, their presence a constant weight on my mind. I reached the grand staircase and descended into the basement once more, my flashlight casting long, flickering shadows on the stone walls. The statues were waiting, their eyes gleaming in the darkness. They moved with a fluid grace, surrounding me in a circle. "Reveal the secret," the same low, rumbling voice from the night before echoed through the basement, "or face the wrath of the night watchman." I steeled myself, gripping the iron poker tightly. "I don't know the secret," I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. "But I want to understand. I want to help." The statues seemed to hesitate, their movements slowing. For a moment, I thought I had reached them. But then, the ground beneath my feet began to tremble. The walls seemed to close in, and a low, menacing growl filled the air. "You cannot help," the voice intoned. "You can only obey." Panic surged through me, and I turned to flee. The statues lunged forward, their stone hands reaching out to grab me. I swung the iron poker, the heavy metal connecting with a sickening crunch. One of the statues staggered back, its stone face cracking, but the others pressed forward, relentless in their pursuit. I ran, the flashlight beam bouncing wildly as I navigated the twisting corridors. The statues were right behind me, their footsteps echoing through the basement like a relentless drumbeat. I burst through the door at the top of the stairs and slammed it shut behind me, my chest heaving with exertion. For a moment there was silence. I leaned against the door, my mind racing to make sense of what I had seen. But the quiet was shattered by a low, rumbling voice that seemed to come from the very walls themselves. "Reveal the secret," it whispered, the words reverberating through the hallway, "or face the wrath of the night watchman." I backed away from the door, my hands trembling. The statues had come to life, and they were demanding something from me, something hidden within the walls of the estate. But what secret could be so important that it warranted such a terrifying pursuit? The night was far from over, and as the shadows deepened, I realized that I was entangled in a mystery far darker than I had ever imagined. The night watchmen were relentless, and they would stop at nothing until I uncovered the secret they so jealously guarded. Part 3. The Hunt. I spent the next day trying to piece together more of the estate's history. Thornfield's journal had mentioned a hidden room, one that supposedly held the key to the secret the statues were guarding. I scoured the library for clues, cross-referencing old maps and architectural plans with the notes in the journal. By mid-afternoon, I found a faded map tucked inside a book about secret passages. It showed a hidden room located behind a false wall in the basement. My heart raced with a mix of excitement and dread. If the room was still there, it might hold the answers I needed to lift the curse and free myself from the night watchman. As night approached, I prepared myself for another descent into the basement. I armed myself with the iron poker and a lantern, hoping the additional light would give me an advantage. I also tied a length of rope around my waist, securing it to the banister at the top of the stairs. If the statues attacked again, I didn't want to be trapped in the basement with no way out. The house was eerily quiet as I made my way down the staircase, the lantern casting long, flickering shadows on the walls. I reached the bottom and paused, listening for any sign of the statues. The air was thick with tension, but the corridor was empty. I moved quickly, following the map to the section of the basement where the hidden room was supposed to be. The walls were lined with shelves and old furniture, but after a few minutes of searching, I found what I was looking for. A section of wall that sounded hollow when I tapped it. I used the iron poker to pry open the false wall, revealing a narrow passageway. The air inside was cold and musty, and I could see the faint outline of a door at the end of the passage. My heart pounded in my chest as I approached, the weight of the secret pressing down on me. The door was old and creaked loudly as I pushed it open. Inside was a small, dimly lit room filled with shelves of books and strange artifacts. At the center of the room was a large stone altar, covered in carvings and symbols that seemed to pulse with an eerie light. I approached the altar, my eyes scanning the carvings for any clues. There were words etched into the stone in a language I didn't recognize, but as I traced my fingers over the symbols, a sense of understanding washed over me. The carvings told a story of ancient guardians, spirits bound to protect a powerful secret hidden within the estate. The room began to tremble, and I turned to see the statues standing in the doorway, their eyes glowing with a malevolent light. They moved towards me, their stone forms creaking and groaning with each step. I backed away, my heart pounding in my chest. "I found the room," I said, my voice trembling. "I found the secret you're guarding. What do you want from me?" The statues stopped, their eyes fixed on the altar. The air was filled with a low, rumbling sound, and I could feel the ground beneath my feet shaking. The altar began to glow, the carvings pulsing with an intense light that filled the room. A voice echoed through the chamber, ancient and powerful. "You have found the secret," it said. "But to lift the curse, you must prove yourself worthy. Reveal the truth hidden within these walls, and the night watchmen will be released from their eternal duty." I looked at the altar, the carvings shimmering with an otherworldly light. The answer was here, in this room. I just had to find it. I began to search the shelves, pulling down books and examining artifacts, hoping to find a clue that would unlock the secret. As I worked, the statues remained still, their eyes following my every move. The tension in the air was palpable, and I could feel their impatience growing. Time was running out. Finally, I found it, a small leather-bound book hidden at the back of a shelf. The cover was worn and faded, but the pages inside were filled with detailed notes and diagrams. It was Thornfield's journal, detailing his research into the ancient guardians and the secret they protected. I read through the journal, my eyes scanning the pages for any clues. The final entry caught my attention. It spoke of a ritual, a way to communicate with the spirits and reveal the truth hidden within the estate. But it also warned of the consequences. If the ritual was performed incorrectly, the curse would be strengthened, and the night watchman would never be freed. I had no choice. I had to perform the ritual. I followed the instructions in the journal, arranging the artifacts on the altar and chanting the ancient words. The room began to tremble, and the air was filled with a blinding light. For a moment, I was engulfed in darkness. I could hear the statues moving, their stone forms creaking and groaning as they approached. But as the light faded, I saw the truth. The secret hidden within the estate was a powerful force, one that had been bound by the guardians to protect the world from its destructive power. The statues stopped, their eyes losing their glow. The curse had been lifted, and the night watchmen were finally free. Part 4. The Unveiling. As the light faded, the room was plunged into an eerie silence. The statues stood still, their eyes no longer glowing with malevolent intent. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange mix of relief and apprehension. The curse had been lifted, but I still didn't fully understand the secret that had been hidden within the estate. The journal had mentioned a powerful force, something the guardians were bound to protect. I needed to know more. I approached the altar again, my eyes scanning the carvings for any additional clues. The ancient symbols seemed to shimmer in the dim light, almost as if they were alive. I remembered the leather-bound book I had found earlier, the one filled with detailed notes and diagrams. I retrieved it from the altar and began to read through the final entries once more. Thornfield's words were frantic, almost desperate, as he described the ritual he had performed and the visions it had revealed to him. According to the journal, the estate was built over an ancient burial ground, a place where powerful spirits had been laid to rest centuries ago. The statues were not just guardians, but also conduits, channeling the energy of the spirits and keeping the powerful force contained. Thornfield had believed that the force was a source of great power, something that could grant immortality or unimaginable strength. But he had also realized too late that it was a force of destruction, one that could bring about untold devastation if unleashed. As I read, I felt a chill run down my spine. The carvings on the altar depicted a battle between the guardians and a dark entity, a force that sought to consume everything in its path. The guardians had managed to contain the entity, binding it within the estate and using their own power to keep it dormant. But now, the balance had been disturbed. By lifting the curse, I had inadvertently weakened the guardians' hold on the entity. I needed to find a way to restore the balance before it was too late. I spent the next few hours searching the hidden room for anything that could help me. The shelves were filled with old books and scrolls, many of them written in languages I couldn't read. But I managed to find a few texts that seemed to relate to the guardians and their rituals. With the help of the journal, I began to piece together a plan. The key was to strengthen the bond between the guardians and the entity. According to the texts, there was a ritual that could reinforce the binding spell, but it required a powerful catalyst, something that could channel the energy of the guardians and focus it on the entity. I needed to find an artifact that held a connection to the guardians, something that could amplify their power. I remembered the statues in the garden. They were not just decorations, but also extensions of the guardians' power. If I could find a way to use one of the statues in the ritual, it might be enough to restore the balance. As night fell, I prepared to leave the hidden room. The statues in the basement had not moved, their forms now lifeless and still. But I knew that the danger was far from over. The entity was still there, waiting for an opportunity to break free. I made my way back to the garden, the moonlight casting long shadows on the overgrown grass. The statues stood silently, their expressions frozen in stone. I approached one of the knights, its sword raised as if in mid-battle. There was something about this statue that felt different, almost as if it was watching me. I reached out and touched the statue's sword, feeling a strange energy pulsing through the cold stone. This was the catalyst I needed. I just had to figure out how to transport it to the hidden room without attracting the entity's attention. I found a wheelbarrow in the old shed and carefully lifted the statue into it. The stone was heavy, but I managed to move it without too much difficulty. I wheeled the statue back to the house, my heart pounding with each creak of the wheelbarrow. The air felt charged with anticipation, and I could almost sense the entity's presence. lurking in the shadows. Once inside, I maneuvered the statue down the grand staircase and into the basement. The corridor was dark and silent, the weight of the night pressing down on me. I reached the hidden room and positioned the statue in front of the altar, its sword pointing towards the carvings. I took a deep breath and began the ritual, chanting the ancient words and focusing my energy on the statue. The air around me seemed to hum with power, and I could feel the guardian's presence growing stronger. The carvings on the altar began to glow, the light intensifying with each passing second. Suddenly, the ground beneath me trembled, and a low growl filled the air. The entity was awakening, its dark energy surging through the room. I continued the ritual, pouring all my strength into the words, hoping that it would be enough to contain the entity once more. The light from the altar reached a blinding intensity, and I felt a surge of energy flow through me. The statue's eyes began to glow, and I could see the guardian's power channeled through it, focusing on the entity. The growl grew louder, but the light continued to push it back, forcing it into submission. With a final, desperate chant, I completed the ritual. The light from the altar exploded outward, filling the room with a brilliant, blinding radiance. The ground shook violently, and I felt a wave of energy wash over me, knocking me off my feet. When the light finally faded, I found myself lying on the cold stone floor, the air still and silent. The statues were motionless once more, their eyes lifeless and dark. The carvings on the altar had stopped glowing, their light extinguished. I stood up, my body trembling with exhaustion. The ritual had worked. The entity was contained, and the balance had been restored. The guardians had done their duty, and the estate was safe once more. But as I looked around the room, I knew that the nightmare was far from over. The secret of the estate had been revealed, but its dark history would always be a part of me. The night watchmen had been freed from their curse, but their legacy would live on, a reminder of the power and danger that lay hidden within the walls of the ancient estate. Part 5. The Departure. The morning sun filtered through the grand windows, casting a warm glow over the estate. The night's events seemed like a distant nightmare, but the weight of the secret I had uncovered still pressed heavily on my mind. I knew that I couldn't stay in this house any longer. The guardians had done their duty, and it was time for me to leave. I packed my belongings quickly, my eyes darting nervously to the statues in the garden. They were still now, their forms as lifeless as any ordinary stone sculpture, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they were watching me, even in their dormant state. As I loaded my suitcase into the car, I took one last look at the estate. It was a beautiful, imposing structure, its history etched into every stone. But I knew that I couldn't live there, not with the knowledge of what lay hidden within its walls. Driving away from the estate, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. I had come here looking for a new beginning, a fresh start. Instead, I had found a dark secret that would haunt me for the rest of my life. The guardians had been freed from their curse, but their legacy would always be a part of me. The drive to the nearest village was uneventful. I passed through dense forests and rolling hills, the landscape slowly giving way to signs of civilization. The village was small and quaint, its streets lined with charming cottages and friendly faces. It was a stark contrast to the imposing estate I had left behind. I found a small inn and checked in, eager to put some distance between myself and the estate. The innkeeper was a cheerful old man who welcomed me warmly, asking if I was a tourist. "Just passing through," I replied, forcing a smile. "I needed a change of scenery." He nodded knowingly. "Well, you've come to the right place. The village is peaceful, and the people are friendly. You'll find it a nice change from the hustle and bustle of the city." I thanked him and went to my room, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. The room was simple, but cozy, with a comfortable bed and a window that overlooked the village square. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. As I settled into the inn, I couldn't help but reflect on the events that had led me here. The estate, the statues, the ritual. It all seemed so surreal. But the memories were vivid, and I knew that they would stay with me forever. I spent the next few days exploring the village, trying to put the past behind me. The villagers were friendly and welcoming, and I found solace in their simple way of life. I took long walks through the countryside, the the fresh air and beautiful scenery helping to clear my mind. But despite my best efforts, the memories of the estate continued to haunt me. I couldn't shake the feeling that the guardians were still watching me, their presence a constant reminder of the dark secret I had uncovered. One evening, as I was sitting in the inn's common room, the innkeeper approached me. "You seem troubled," he said, his eyes filled with concern. "Is there something on your mind?" I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how much to reveal. But the innkeeper's kind demeanor put me at ease, and I found myself telling him everything: the estate, the statues, the ritual, and the secret I had uncovered. He listened attentively, nodding occasionally as I spoke. When I finished, he was silent for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "You've been through a lot," he said finally, "but it sounds like you did the right thing. The guardians were bound to that secret for a reason, and you helped them fulfill their duty." I nodded, feeling a sense of validation. "But what now?" I asked. "How do I move on from this?" The innkeeper smiled gently. "You take it one day at a time. You find joy in the little things, and you surround yourself with good people. The past may always be a part of you, but it doesn't have to define you." His words were comforting, and I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The estate and its secrets would always be with me, but I didn't have to let them control my life. I could move forward, find happiness, and build a new future. As I left the inn and walked through the village, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the cottages and fields. The air was filled with the sounds of laughter and conversation, a reminder that life goes on. I knew that I would never forget the night watchmen and the dark secret they had guarded. But I also knew that I had the strength to move on, to find peace and happiness in the days ahead. The past was a part of me, but it didn't have to define my future. With a sense of hope and determination, I continued my journey, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The night watchman had been freed, and so had I.